everyone, and thank you for tuning in. We are chatting with the CEO of Free League Publishing, Tomas Harenstam. Thomas, how you doing today?
Good, good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on to talk a little bit about Free League Publishing. And for those who might not be familiar with the company, can you tell us a little bit about what Free League Publishing is, and maybe a little bit of a history on the company as well, too?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we mainly do tabletop RPGs. We've done a bunch of them. I think we have around 15 to 20 game lines right now. So we've done everything from some licensed games like the Alien RPG, the Blade Runner RPG, and a couple of others, the One Ring, and also some other original games like Dragonbane and Room and Coriolis and a bunch of others. We've been around for about a decade, a little bit more than a decade. We started out real small, just weekends, nights kind of thing. We all had other real jobs back then. But yeah, so about 5, 6 years ago, it kind of took off a little bit. So now it's actually the full-time thing that we do, a few of us over here. We're based in Stockholm, Sweden.
Awesome. Yeah, and you mentioned a lot of the games that you all are known for, which I'll be honest, and this is not me, blowing smoke or anything like that, but Free League Publishing is one of my favorite companies with the tabletop role-playing games because I absolutely love Dragonbane. That's what got me into learning a little bit more about Free League Publishing because I saw the advertisement 2 years ago at Gen Con.
Right.
I'll be honest and say that what really drew me into it was the cover with the assassin mallard duck that looked
Yeah.
a lot like a gothic Darkwing Duck for me.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. No,
I
that yeah, the duck. It's a very cool image, and the artist, Johan Egerkrans, who does most of the work, most of the art for Dragonbane and some of the games. That image is actually based on a really old 1980s image, not but of another like a hobbit, I think, assassin jumping down from like a vaulted passage like that. So it's
right.
actually like an homage to an older image. But no, he's a very good, very talented artist and a role player himself. So I mean, he really enjoyed making that image, and I think it shows.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And there's a whole. I remember looking into it. There's a whole history with that character that was really fascinating, and then made an appearance with the Path of Glory book. But before we go
Yeah.
down that road, talking more a little bit about Dragonbane, because that would be amiss if I don't talk to you about that a little bit more. But I wanted to ask you personally, what got you into tabletop role playing games, and how has that kind of led to your journey with getting into and being involved with Free League Publishing?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big thing. Tabletop RPGs took off really in the 80s here in Sweden, a couple of years after the US, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I started playing, I got my first RPG like for my birthday, 1985. I was 11. I didn't know what it was. My dad didn't know what it was, but me and my older brother just started playing, and we didn't know what this thing was at all. But it started, and then when we kind of got into it, we just never really stopped. So then back then, the only games that were easily available were in like Swedish games. But pretty soon I discovered that there were actually games in English, and I found like a hobby store, and I started playing games like Marvel Superheroes and a bunch of others. I started playing Warhammer. I started playing all kinds of stuff. So that really just took off from there, and I never really looked back. I had a bit of a break around like the turn of the millennium, I think, when I was sort of doing other things and didn't lost my gaming group and things like that. But then after that, a couple of years after, I started getting into RPGs again and started writing like freelance stuff just for fun, just publishing things. But and then on some internet forums that were around back then, I came in touch with a couple of other people
Mm-hmm.
who wrote for a game that existed back then called Coriolis. That was not originally by Free League, but by another publisher, and they freelanced for that. And I was doing some other things, and there is a faction in Coriolis, an in-game faction called the Free League.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what that they took the name from there. We took the name from there, and then it was just a bunch of sort of freelancers doing it for fun. But then that publisher who published the first edition of Coriolis, they went out of business,
Mm-hmm.
and they asked us if we wanted to take over and continue publishing things for Coriolis and another game that they had been working on. So that we decided to do that, but then we had to start a company. So that's when the company really started. That was 2011. And then that's kind of how the whole thing started. And yeah, like I mentioned, we had other like day jobs, and that was just sort of started out as something fun to do. But yeah, they kind of grew from there. We started publishing Simon Stollenhag's art books, and then we did the Tales from the Loop RPG based on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually that led kind of to the Alien RPG, and it kind of just grew from there. And yeah, so it's been an interesting and strange journey.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for giving the history on that. That's really fascinating to kind of hear where the name came from, and how y'all are able to acquire that game. And as we were talking about before, Dragonbane is probably, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's probably one of your flagship games for the company as well.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And just as you said, with the company has just started 10 years ago, Dragonbane was actually a role-playing game that is based on a role-playing game that came out in the 80s in Sweden.
Yeah.
And just as you mentioned before, though, you all also came out with The One Ring, which is a role-playing game that has a unique system that is centered around the Lord of the Rings lore. But you all also put out like a 5th edition supplement as well too, so if people want to play that. And you guys just got that release on D&D Beyond recently, which I know a lot of people are excited about that to see that on there. But the Alien RPG, I think the Electric State, Mutant Year Zero. Am I saying that correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
Vaesen, yeah. So you all have like a lot of great games I absolutely love and enjoy, and honestly, I think every time I see something from Free League, it's just excites me because I know a lot of the games that y'all put out there is done with love and care, and it's just really fun and interesting and exciting, and just from like all aspects of it. When you were talking about Dragonbane and the artwork earlier, I absolutely love how Dragonbane and Vaesen has that kind of a. I don't know how to describe it necessarily. Maybe you guys have something internally where you describe the kind of art, but it's kind of like a dark fantasy, gritty kind of art. But when you look at it, it's definitely something that you can identify pretty quickly, and it seems like a lot of people who either make things in the spirit of Dragonbane or third-party stuff or anything like that has that sort of aesthetic kind of caked into it. So that's just to say, like, all of your games that y'all put out, I am personally impressed and absolutely love with like all aspects of it. But I do want to talk about Dragonbane a little bit and ask you a little bit more about how things have been going with that game and what we can expect in the future, because you all published that a couple years ago. Since then, you released a bestiary where people can use more monsters. Last fall, you put out like the first campaign book of Path of Glory, which is based on some of the original games adventures that came out years ago. And I think the person that wrote those were also on this book. I don't know if they wrote it or if they consulted or whatnot, but I saw they did the foreword for it. And I absolutely love it. Like, I love the magical traps that's in there. I love the brandy dragon. I thought that was so great. But then we also got to see the as we mentioned before, the Darkwing Duck character that I call I think Antala was her name, that's based off of the novel and stuff like that as well too. But we get our first publication of that character in here. So I guess I just want to kind of ask you, like, how those things have been going since y'all released that, and what else can we expect with Dragonbane in the future from Free League Publishing?
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned there, Dragonbane is definitely one of our flagship games. It's one of our fully owned games, which means it'll be with us for the long term, and we want to do a lot with it. It's since, like you mentioned, also it's actually like the 11th edition, depending on how you count, of an old Swedish game, which is in turn originally based on a game by a very small fantasy game by Chaosium in the early 80s. That was called Fantasy Worlds, I think, something like that. So that was actually the first edition, was a translation of that into Swedish, but then over the years, it just took off on its own, and now it's a different thing. But it does have some kind of heritage that leads back to Chaosium and their kind of RuneQuest, that rule set. So there is some in the rules that are there was a kinship still there. But yeah, so our edition was not. It's I mean, all of the editions over the years have been very different. So I think our edition, we brought our own aesthetic and our own style of creating games into it. So it's yes, it does build on that old heritage, but it's also very much a new free league game as well. So and that was important to us. But yeah, so we do. It's been going really well. It's never you never know. They're launching a completely new game like that's not a known license or anything.
Right.
It can be hit tricky, but no, it's been welcomed really well over everywhere it seems, which is great. A lot of fun and like you mentioned there, Path of Glory, the first campaign book. It's also based on an old campaign that was released in 3 parts, like 3 small booklets back in the 80s. We kind of worked with that and made a new edition, but it's not like the same adventure. It does share some of the core things, the things we really enjoyed about those old adventures, but it is also reworked. I mean, of course, all of the art, everything is new. It's not like anything, but it does have that history, which I think gives it an extra. It's kind of nice to have that there as well. And the original writer who wrote the 2 of the 3 original adventures, he was also did some writing and consulted on the new book as well. So, and that's been really great to get his idea of what we could actually, do some things that he wanted to do back then, but was never really able to realize for a variety of reasons. But now we could actually bring some of the things that he had always wanted to get into those adventures to finally get it in there. So that's a lot of fun. And going forward, yeah, we have a pretty big plan. We will do more like releases, new editions, reimagined versions of like classic old stuff, but also do completely new things. So the things we have coming up, it's like 2 books coming up pretty soon. Will probably be a Kickstarter later in the spring. It's a campaign book about a fantasy city called Arkand.
Okay.
We're working on that right now. I just got like really great art from it by Johan Egerkrans. He just sends things over like messenger chats and things when he works on it. So I just saw a few really cool pieces right before the interview now, because he's working on that and that's coming together really well. So we're hopefully be able to share more on that soon, like in a month or 2. And alongside that, we'll probably launch them side by side. We're not 100% sure, probably. We have a book of magic. So basically, it expands the magic system a lot.
Yeah.
The core game has 3 schools of magic, and that's enough to get you started, I guess.
Right.
But the book of magic has like 12 or something, and rules for magic items, for alchemy, for magic schools of magic academies and things. It just expands the whole field of magic in the game. So those 2 books will probably be launched like together pretty soon.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to what you were saying about how successful, exciting Dragonbane has been. As I mentioned, I first came across Dragonbane 2 years ago at Gen Con, and about a month later, I was talking to some people in our local gaming store to see who else was interested in Dragonbane, and there is a group of people that end up playing that game for a year, and we just absolutely love playing it. There's a player and I who we like naturally just created like some sort of competition between our 2 characters, and we use the pre-generated character. So I played Bastion, which was a Wolfkin fighter.
Yeah.
And then they played Makander, which was a Mallard character as well. But what's funny, and I'm glad you bring up the magic book that y'all are working on, is that through that campaign, we did the Secrets of the Dragon Empire, and somehow my character Bastion ended up learning how to become a spellcaster, and I was able to do like different spells. And so, and it was nothing that I was actually planning on. I don't think any of us were planning on. It just happened to like work that way. So it was a lot of fun of being able to try to do some spells sometimes. And so hearing that, you all might be coming out with a new magic book to expand on that is a lot of fun, but it's something that like I just absolutely love as a tabletop role playing game because I've always tell people like it's very familiar in terms of a D20 system, but it's also
Yeah.
very different with the rules, how you would play it. I love how a lot of things about it is a lot more straightforward, so you can just go into and just like have fun with it, as opposed to trying to do like a bunch of math or a bunch of like
Yeah.
steps of like if this and that sort of thing. And so we
Yeah.
absolutely love Dragonbane for that. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this though, because I've asked people about this a lot, and I don't think that we have an answer yet. So I don't know if Free League Publishing has an answer on this, but the world that Dragonbane takes place in, is there like an official name for that setting or that world that you all use, or is it just kind of agnostic for time being and you just focus more on like regions, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much that's a big discussion we had when we designed the core game, is that we decided to actually not have like an official big setting. And the reason for that is that we wanted to have, and that's kind of ties into the philosophy of the game overall, that also I think comes through in the rules, that we wanted people to just go with it a little bit and not feel they had to, think too much about where in the world this would take place and what. I mean, you could basically put it in any world you want.
Right.
And instead, we focused on smaller settings like regional micro settings, like the Misty Vale, and then you have the Dead Forest, and you have like, but you don't know exactly where they are, and you don't have a big world map and to place them on. You just know, kind of get a vague idea. And I think that also kind of builds a little bit of mystery that I think is actually kind of fun, that you don't know what the world looks like because maybe the characters don't even know that. So I don't think that. So that's kind of the philosophy we have been working from. But then, of course, doing more campaign books and things, you are sort of actually building a world piece by piece anyway. It's kind of hard to avoid. Like in
Right.
Path of Glory, you have the Eastern lands, and you have it's kind of grows. So yeah, but we do avoid having like this is the official setting and this is what the whole world looks like. So probably we'll stay a little bit away from that, and instead we have like a number of, actually, I mean, there's a lot of great third-party stuff for Dragonbane, and some of that
Right.
is world building. So we'll probably, I mean, so you can actually find full worlds there. So, and that's kind of nice. So you can actually play Dragonbane in the multiple worlds. You can kind of choose the world you want, build your own, instead of forcing everyone to play in the same world.
Right, right. Yeah, and I really love that because I know in Path of Glory, when you learn a little bit more about Ank'Tala, it talks about like the area that she's from. It almost seems like it's not a different plane necessarily, but it's definitely something that's not like as accessible as Misty Vale or something along those lines. Yeah. But that was one of the things that we had talked about when I talked to other people who are also fans of Dragonbane, is that kind of doing it that way does make it a little bit more gives the players and the game master a little bit more freedom on how to incorporate those settings if they want to do that or do something completely different and feel like they're not like breaking any sort of lore or anything like that, which me personally, I think it's, you can always break lore and still have a game because, that's like that's a table game, so you can, just whatever setting you want to do. But I think that's one of the nice things about Dragonbane is to be able to, focus more on the campaign rather than what's the lore of the setting, which it gives a little bit of lore about like what happened with elves and dwarves and things like that. But like, that's very kind of like a foundational thing that you can do with it as you will and doesn't really impact, the game overall. So
we have
go ahead.
I mean, we do have, there's like a little bit of like a foundation of a lore that's still there, and that's even mentioned in the core game, that there is this sort of almost metaphysical battle between dragons and demons that's kind of happened a long time ago. So you have these ancient dragon kingdoms and demon areas and things like that. But that's sort of part of sort of the metaphysics of the world, really. But that's sort of on a very basic level. So we don't really describe the countries and every city and where they are, but you have that kind of a basic foundation of what this world is about.
Right.
But we sort of save the details for more regional settings.
Right, exactly. And one of the things that why I've always been interested to see if there's like an official setting is because I've had this idea for a game I'm running for another tabletop role-playing game, is to try to do different settings from different games to kind of get my players introduced to like those kinds of things. And so I've always wanted. I'm planning on bringing Dragonbane into that campaign one way or another. And so I was trying to think of like, is there like an official setting? If not, I'll just call it like, Misty Vale or something like that, kind of something a little bit, not generic necessarily, but at least descriptive. So that way they get a sense of what that world is like when their characters get magically transported into the Dragonbane setting. So, so we talked about Dragonbane, but Free League Publishing, puts out a lot more games than Dragonbane. You all have put out, like we said before, the One Ring, and then the Lord of the Rings for fifth edition supplement, Vaesen, all kinds of tabletop role playing games. What are some of the other projects that you all are working on that we can expect to come out later this year, or anything that you want to share with us right now?
Oh yeah, I mean we have a bunch of stuff. I mean one of the other our own fully owned games is Coriolis. That's coming in a new edition soon. That was on Kickstarter last year, and we're now just finalizing everything, sending things to print soon. So around Gen Con time, the new edition of Coriolis should be out. It's a science fiction game that's focused on like mystery and exploration and things like that. So that's coming. We're also doing a new edition or an evolved edition, we call it, of the Alien RPG. So that's coming also a little bit later.
Right.
Those are two big ones coming up. And then we have like a actually completely new game that can't announce just yet, but that's coming pretty soon too. So yeah, it's and a bunch of other stuff, more things for the One Ring and more things for a bunch of other games as well.
Yeah. Now you brought up Alien RPG, which I'll be honest, like I've never been a fan of the movie Alien, just because it's something that doesn't really like interest me. But I've heard people play it, and they had talked about how much they love playing Alien role playing game. I'm kind of curious. Maybe you can give us some insight, because it seems like there is a trend now where when there is intellectual property involved, they want to do like all the things related to it, right? So like we get so many RPGs now that's based on intellectual property. Trading card games is like starting to get huge in that area. The obvious things like toys and stuff like that, board games. But it's really interesting to see how pretty much no matter what area you're going into, there is some sort of IP version of that. With you all having created Alien role-playing game, can you give us a little bit of insight, like what that looked like when you were trying to create that game with an existing property like Alien, and what are maybe I guess some interesting things that people may not know about, or some challenges that you weren't anticipating, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us at least, first and foremost, we don't do any licensed IP that comes our way. It has to be the right one, and so we really feel that it has to be someone here at Free League who really feels, really, really passionate about a particular IP. So we have some real diehard Alien fans, and I did a lot of work on the Blade Runner RPG, which is a favorite films of mine. So that's there has to be that passion there. If otherwise, I don't think it's going to be a good game. So, and after that, we really think really hard about how do we actually, does this work as a game, and what from this franchise, whatever it might be, works. How can you turn that into a game that's actually fun to play? So those are like the core things that we always do. And then of course it's these licensed projects. You have a licensor who owns the IP, so you have to get things approved. So it's always like a long process there, and that can take a bit of time. But I think we've been fortunate enough that there haven't been any major hurdles or big huge problems beyond the fact that everything takes more time because there's a lot of more people involved. You have to get everything approved, so making decisions takes time. So that's a bit of a challenge, but generally it's been fun. I mean, I really enjoy playing around in other people's worlds as well as our own. So for us, we're trying to do a bit of both, some licensed games and then some of our own games, and try to do both. That's sort of what we're aiming for, about a 50-50 thing, I guess.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I love hearing you all say that the passion has to be there for these things, that you don't take anything that gets thrown your way, because I think we are starting to see that a lot more with public I don't want to say reaction, but public response to companies who are doing things more from a passion point of view rather than like a business point of view. Because I think with everything that we've experienced lately and all that, I think it's great to see that businesses are starting to see that if the passion isn't there, people are going to see through it really quickly, whether it's going to get you a lot of money or not. And it's really good to see that people's responses to games as this is something that creators have made because you could tell that they put a lot of love and interest into it, not as a way to capitalize on the name and things like that. I think has really gone a long way, and I'm glad to hear, not that I'm surprised by any means whatsoever, but I'm glad to hear that Free League has that same approach of you want to make sure that you all are passionate about what you're working on, and not that it's just a big name that you want to work on as well too. So which is really great to hear. I guess with to wrap things up a little bit, I want to ask a couple more questions and kind of give you like a chance to share anything else. But with running a tabletop role-playing game publishing company, first of all, I love how your website kind of gives like the 3 different categories that y'all work on with the different tabletop role-playing games, which I find it really fascinating because I'm not a sci-fi person whatsoever in terms of role-playing games, so it's not something of interest to me personally, but I love how you all have been worked on those enough that you have your own category for those things. But I guess I'm kind of curious, for those who are interested in learning a little bit more about the industry itself, what is something about having a company that specializes in creating tabletop role-playing games that you think people, the general public, may not be aware of that could be very insightful for us to know as enthusiasts of the hobby?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of things going into it. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe I think people might really already know that, but I mean, I think there is a lot of work.
Right.
I mean, from every. I mean, and I think the thing that's a bit special maybe about the tabletop RPG industry compared to others is that even though, I mean, we're still a small company and we're not that many, which means we're still very hands-on. So I mean, and that's something I think makes it a lot of fun. So that, I mean, I'm working on everything from talking to distributors to writing games to fixing the things around the office, changing a light bulb. I mean, it's everything. You do everything from the smallest little thing to like the big decisions on what will we be doing for the next 3 years, whatever. I mean, so that whole thing I think is a little bit special compared to maybe like the video games industry where projects are bigger, there's much more people involved, so everyone has their own little thing. Whereas here in tabletop RPGs, I think it's still possible to do be involved in every part of the process, which I think is part of why I think it's so much fun.
Awesome. I love hearing that. Well, my final question for you then is, anything that you want to share with us about what we can expect from Free League Publishing. I know we talked about, the projects are coming up for Dragonbane, but maybe this is for other games or something that the company is planning on doing later this year that you can share, obviously.
Yeah.
But anything that you want to share with us that we can, look forward to for the upcoming year from Free League Publishing.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, we have a bunch of things coming out, but beyond that, I mean, we have another Dragonbane adventure for free RPG Day, so that might be fun.
Ooh, nice. Yeah.
We do that. It's going to be the 3rd year running now, so that's kind of cool. Of course, we'll be in a lot of conventions. Gen Con being the big one, so there we'll have a big presence, and also, like I mentioned, we'll be. Probably, unless something, but probably announcing a new game title pretty soon as well. So that's gonna be fun to see what people think about that one.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Thomas, thank you very much for coming on. This is not a show. This is my YouTube channel. I don't even know what to refer to it as. But thanks for meeting with me to talk a little bit about Free League Publishing. I'm a huge fan of the company and the games that you guys have been putting out, and I look forward to see you more coming out from Free League. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.